So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are located. My name is Uma Shrivastava, and along with me is the founder of Culture City, Dr. Julian Maha. And today we're so excited to share with you a little bit about Culture City, what it means to be sensory inclusive, and then we'll jump into Julian and he'll share his story on how it all began. So, just a real quick background. I know our bios have been rotating, but I've been a part of Culture City for about 5.5, 6 years now. The nonprofit was founded about 8 years ago. I started off as a volunteer and eventually built my way up, and I'm very proud to have the title of the executive director position. Culture City is located all throughout America, Canada, and actually the world. I am based out of Nashville, but we have team members based out of Boston, Atlanta, Vegas, and Nashville, of course. So very used to the remote lifestyle. Before we dive right in, I would like to play a video for you, and fingers crossed that it works well.
Hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this.
You have to turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Are you all on?
Miss Uma?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think she has an internet issue.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I think we lost you for a moment there.
Oh no.
Lost for about 10 minutes, Uma.
For 10 minutes? So what was the last thing you heard?
You were muted, yeah.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Yes.
But can you see my screen?
Yeah, I would just say start from after the video again. Sorry.
Okay, all right. No worries. Okay, let's try this again. So, I hope everybody can hear me now. I don't know what's happening with Teams. It's not my personal favorite platform, but Culture City's main community or audience that we support are those with sensory needs, and I'll jump into that a little later in the presentation. We have a lot of different programs, a lot of different tools available for these individuals and families, and one of the biggest programs that we have are certifying venues and organizations. And this certification started about 5 years ago, and just in our short 5-year time frame, we have been able to certify over 800 venues in 4 countries. And within the US, we're present in 44 out of the 50 states. And so truly some amazing work being done by our team. We also build out sensory rooms, and we've built out about 105 sensory rooms, again, worldwide, and are currently building 30 more as we speak in constant conversations with several other organizations. Yes, 2020 was the year for COVID shutdowns and lockdowns, but even then we were able to train over 10,000 staff just alone in 2020. And that's because a lot of our venues started to open up, whether it was at limited capacity or they started doing a lot of virtual tours and meetings, and they still needed those tools to make sure they were being inclusive. We have something called social stories on our app, and I'll dive into that a bit later. And these are visual narratives that help individuals prepare for their visit. And we've had over 100,000 views of these social stories. So that's, 110,000 times that folks know better what to expect when they're stepping into a facility of some sort. And on average, we're seeing about 4,500 of our sensory bags being checked out throughout our venues, and so truly just some remarkable stuff taking place here. This is a quick map of where we are in the US, also internationally. So have a good presence again in the US. We have several Canadian venues, again in the UK, and then also in Australia, and super excited to hopefully add more in the South Asian market after today's talk. Diving into some of our major league partnerships, we have really amazing partnerships with a lot of the major league teams or organizations out there. So within the NBA, we are in 27 out of the 30 teams' venues. The last 3 we are very quickly working on, and unfortunately COVID has hindered that process just a little. With the NFL, we have been nurturing this relationship, and they have now committed to making all of their major events sensory inclusive. So yes, they're day-to-day sporting events that take place, but also the Pro Bowl, the Super Bowl, the draft. Very similarly with soccer, it's a new relationship, and we're nurturing it and building it out. MLB baseball is another great league partnership of ours. We were just in Denver in July making their All-Star Week sensory inclusive. And one of the feedback that we got from one of the families who attended was, thank you so much for having this here. We live 4 hours away. We're huge baseball fans, and we really weren't sure if we should come out, but we saw that this event is now sensory inclusive, and so we were able to come and enjoy. And so those are the stories on how we are truly impacting families and individuals. Hockey, again, a little over half of the teams and venues are certified. And then with Australia, we are working with the Australian Football League. And hopefully, with everything going back to normal, the world resuming, we'll be able to onboard a lot more of their footy teams. So real quick, you've already heard me in the last 10 minutes toss around sensory processing, sensory needs. I'll touch real quickly on what that is. So sensory processing is the method in which the nervous system uses to recognize, organize, and make sense of incoming input. And so this includes both information coming from the external environment and also from the body internally. We were all taught in school that we have 5 senses. That's actually not true. We have 8 senses. So of course we are all familiar with the first 4, and then taste. But our training really highlights the importance of the 3 new senses that you see here: interoception, vestibular, and proprioception. And all 8 senses together really bring in sensory processing. And so 1 in 6 individuals in the US has the sensory need. A sensory need is a medical condition where individuals have troubles receiving or filtering information that comes in through those senses. It could be from one sense, it could be from multiple, it could be from all. And sensory needs look and feel very different. They are individuals who are autistic, who have PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, TBI, Down syndrome, dementia, Parkinson's, and a whole host of other conditions that aren't listed here, but still have the environmental sensitivities, the sensory sensitivities. And again, just one last stat in the US, 56.7 million individuals in the US have a disability. So we're really looking at a large population who oftentimes are, held back in social isolation because they are unable to attend a game, an event, a concert, whatever it may be. Looking at the world, we see about that 15 to 18% of the world's population has a disability. So again, globally, this is also having a big impact. It's not just something that's found in the southeast region of the US or the US at large. It's predominant all throughout our different countries and regions. I will attempt to play another video. This video shows an individual having a sensory overload. I do want to provide a trigger warning that there are sudden loud sounds, lights, and imagery that might cause one of us to have a sensory overload. And so please let me know if the audio works, and if not, we'll skip it and I'll share this link again.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand.
So the video here, and let me make sure I am still unmuted.
Yep, you're
Okay.
You're
Awesome.
good.
So the video here shows two different individuals having sensory overloads. In some regards, they are similar, but also in some regards, their sensory overloads look and feel very different. For the young child or almost teenager, the smells of the perfumes, the bubbles, the coins dropping, the sound that the toy machine was making, they all were very triggering to him. So for you and I, what may look like a fun trip to the mall, for this particular individual is something that is triggering and is something that causes a sensory overload. And this could happen anywhere. It could happen at a football game, a basketball game, a mall, a restaurant. And so oftentimes, especially here in the US, we hear the term sensory friendly being used around a lot. And what Kulture City does is we make venues and organizations sensory inclusive. And so I know there's a lot of words here on the slide, but real quick on the left side, sensory friendly typically limits accessibility to a specific time or location. If you are a museum, you might say, hey guys, every Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. we're hosting sensory friendly hours. That sounds great in theory, but what if you have family visiting and you want to go to the museum on Friday? What if it starts raining out of nowhere and you're unable to make that drive to the museum? Well, now you've lost your chance to go and enjoy the museum. You have to wait for their next sensory-friendly hour. In addition, there's no staff training. You and I on the meeting here might have a sensory need, so we know what to do in case of an overload. We might have loved ones with a sensory need, so again, we know what to do, what not to do. But there are folks oftentimes who necessarily haven't had that interaction or have had that education, and that again limits the sensory-friendly notion. Oftentimes, it's typically hard to execute when staff has limited experience and when items and tools are brought in for one specific event and then removed. And typically, it's catered only to the autistic community. I'm sure when I pulled up the list a couple of slides ago, you knew somebody who had several of those other conditions listed. And sure, what if you did an autistic-friendly night and then a PTSI-friendly night and a Down syndrome night? Eventually, you would have to hit all of those nights, and that becomes very difficult to target. And you're truly alienating a fan base. Some individuals don't necessarily want their diagnosis to be public knowledge. Some folks just want to carry on with their lives and not have that be a big deal. So that's where we come in and where sensory inclusive truly comes in. We make sure that daily accessibility is not limited by time and day, that the family can visit that museum as long as their hours are open, not that Wednesday from 3 to 5. We also cater to everybody with sensory needs, not just autism. So it really helps you to say, all right, we don't need a special night for autism, PTSI, Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, so on and so forth. We also provide training. This training is done online, it's done virtually, and so it's very easy no matter whether you're sitting in Australia, in England, or in Alabama to take the training and make your environment more sensory inclusive. We provide sensory bags, as you see over here. All the items in the bag and the bag itself can be wiped down with an antibacterial or a Lysol wipe. And then also we have different tools because different individuals prefer different touches and textures. My favorite is the fidget tool down here. Every time I'm sitting and I have a long meeting, I usually fidget with one of those. Certain individuals might like the other ones here. The noise canceling headphones can be modified to fit both adults and children. So again, it eliminates a lot of the background noise, the yelling, the announcements, the music, but you're still able to hear the caregiver sitting beside you. So if in case of a ball headed your way or a fire alarm, you still can hear the commands and respond appropriately. And then on the left side, there is something called a visual thermometer. It's double-sided, and on one side it has different feelings that somebody might be feeling, and on the back side it has different items that they might need. So again, a really great way to communicate with individuals who are nonverbal, non-speaking, and just better understanding what it is they need. These are some of our sensory rooms that we have built throughout the world. Each of our rooms looks slightly different than the other, and that's because we want to make sure the room fits in with the environment, whether it be the arena, the zoo, the ballpark, but it has very similar items in each. I have another YouTube video that shows the progression of a sensory room that started off as a very old, cold cement room transformed into a beautiful sensory room. However, I'm not going to take the risk of playing it right now just because of some of the tech issues, but again, I will drop it in the chat. So Julian, I'm going to pass it over to you now and share a little bit more about how Culture City all began.
No, thanks, Uma. That was great. Yeah, can you all see me? I think the biggest thing that we want to kind of clarify, especially for audiences in the rest of the world, is the fundamental difference between autism inclusion versus sensory inclusion. So my personal story is that I was born and raised in Malaysia and moved to the United States when I was 16. Went to medical school, became an ER physician, got married. My wife is a pediatric intensive care doctor. And in 2007, had our first child. Our son's name is Abram, and he was developing very, very well until about 2 years old, when pretty much overnight he stopped speaking and he basically started to withdraw into a world of his own. It was very challenging for us, even though we were both in the medical field, because fundamentally what we started to realize was that there was a lack of understanding of individuals like him that look like you and I, but perceive the world in a very different way. We basically went through the whole process of trying to figure out how to integrate him. And the aha moment of the generation and creation of Culture City was really when we started understanding that whenever we would go to an event, like a basketball game, a football game, Abram would be that child that would love to go, but then because of his sensory needs of the noises, the lights, the sounds, that would basically trigger an overload that would cause him to react in a way that everyone around him would perceive as a child that was misbehaving. So we would be that family that essentially would leave after a few minutes because of the fact that we were unable to, deal with, Kim, and we felt that he was in a lot of physical pain at these events. So even though he wanted to go, we would not be able to make it through. So that really kind of created the idea of Culture City, where we really wanted to change the culture of how disabilities as a whole, particularly invisible disabilities, so not only autism, but anyone from PTSD to Down syndrome to dementia to people who have strokes, who all had sensory needs, could go to a space and not be judged because of how they reacted to it, but instead be accepted, included, and welcomed so that they could have a similar experience like all of us. So that was really the genesis of Culture City. We started with a very simple idea on how to basically educate the general community so that they could better serve individuals, that had these invisible disabilities. And our training program initially sat here in Birmingham, Alabama, until 6 months into it, I happened to be at a meeting presenting with the Cleveland Cavaliers general manager. And this was the same year that LeBron James was playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He really loved the idea about opening up his arena and making him the first NBA team to be inclusive to fans like this. But because they were in a playoff hunt, they were really worried that that would not necessarily work at that time. So he wanted to table it for the end of the season. A week into it, after I had met him, I got a call from him where they had a negative public relations episode. They had a child with autism going to an autism game that was billed and advertised as an autism game. The child was non-speaking, so he did not talk. He communicated with an amplifier that sat on his chest. He went through security. Security did not know what that was and ripped it off him. And that triggered a very, very negative event where police were called in, all that kind of stuff, and it went viral. So at that point, they reached out to us and said, hey, is there any way we can make general events inclusive for all? So we basically went in and trained the entire team on how better to serve guests with invisible disabilities. The NBA really, really liked this, and the positive feedback that the Cavaliers were getting from this really translated to where they immediately made us a partner. And now fast forward, 5 years later, we're now in over 700 venues in the US and also several others in Australia, Canada, and the UK. So going back full circle to the difference between autism inclusive versus sensory inclusive. Autism inclusive is great, but it only deals with a segment of a population. When you make it sensory inclusive, you're dealing with a broader base. So for anyone that has a venue, you're able to scale and also present these options to a much larger crowd compared to just saying you're autism inclusive. So a partnership with Culture City enables you to reach many more individuals than just a partnership making your facility autism inclusive. And I think that's the beauty of what Culture City provides. So it kind of goes back to what Uma had talked about, and I'm kind of going to reiterate that. So the biggest question we get is, how easy is it to make a location inclusive? And it's really very easy in the sense that, number one, you really don't have any building or architectural modifications. It's one that, with a combination of our training, our sensory bags, our app integration and social story, it basically helps you reach a population that by and large has been wanting to engage with your locations and your venues, but has not been able to. And then obviously if you have space within the venue, we can work with you on creating a sense room that provides that little bit of reprieve if things get a little too overwhelming. So that's really very easily executed by any venue out there. And we've worked with venues basically large and small, from libraries to venues that host 100,000 people. And by and large, the number one feedback that we get is the fact that, number one, they're opening up their venues to people that wanted to come but have not been able to. Number two, they're decreasing any potential liability issues from a disability accessibility standpoint. And number three, they're able also to boost their bottom line from a financial standpoint, because now they're able to sell tickets, memberships, things of that nature to a population that by and large has never been able to do that. And that's really what Culture City does. We're able to make the nevers possible by helping you open up your locations to guests that have never been given an opportunity. So I know that we've used about almost 30 minutes of our time, but I would really like to open it up to questions right now, because I know that's a lot of information.
All right. I think okay, so are we going to open the Q&A session?
Yeah, let's do that, because it's a lot of information, and this is probably a new topic for a lot of people. So I want to kind of engage as much as we can if there's questions and all that good stuff.
All right. So if anyone has any questions, just kindly write down your questions in the chat box so that I can address the questions to Dr. Julian. So there's a first question. Is there any interest from Malaysia?
Yeah, I mean, not right now, obviously, but with Nur Safina and Pavitran, I think, we definitely want to expand there. I'm obviously Malaysian and definitely would love to see this come to Malaysia, because dealing with a lot of families that we've talked to in Malaysia, I think this is something that is very much needed in Malaysia. I think coming from a Southeast Asian country, we do have some issues when it comes to disability, because we are still of the mindset of individuals with disabilities, are normally just kind of kept at home and not allowed to functionally integrate with society, primarily because there are no services and no one understands how important this is to reach out to this population. So we would love to partner with any venue or any location there and bring this home to Malaysia.
All right. So I think, can we invite Pavi here? Pavi, would you like to say anything? Yeah.
Yes, I'm right over here. Julian, pleasure to meet you. Uma, hello, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to wherever you all are. My name is Haribagara Pavitran. I'm the founder of MyEFM, and it's a great honor to have Julian here, and it's an amazing topic where I've always considered of having Culture City to present this special topic in our program. So this whole idea about having autism inclusive facility began when a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, once the three of us together with his two kids, we went to a restaurant. While having dinner, his autistic son started to act to many people abnormally. And I heard people like at the back table talking about why can't they control their kid? Why can't they discipline their kid? And some of the restaurant workers, they're kind enough, they even brought a wooden a horse, say, hey, you can play with this horse, you can bring some toys. It just explained that people do not really understand how to manage an autistic person within the environment. So when I came across about Culture City through Juliet, it impressed me, and I thought like this should be part of a facility. Let it be a mall, an office, a school, anywhere, a place of public interest. There should be a place where it provides the comfort and the confidence of an autistic person to have a normal life just like us. So looking into that perspective, I think the future is bright with the support of Culture City to assist organizations who wishes to adopt the sensory rooms where they can bring their children or their friends who are autistic and help them to settle in the environment that we are. We can also provide opportunities for autistic children to enjoy sports just like us, how Culture City has done. So I think it's an amazing experience that Culture City has brought for all of us, and hopefully we are able to adopt this soon in Malaysia. And personally, I'm really thinking about being part of Culture City, my organization Maxwell CFM, to be part of Culture City, and as well as MyEFM. So Safina, thank you very much. This is like I would like to share with the audience, and of course I would like to welcome the audience to express their opinions, thoughts, and please do ask tons of questions, because this is something really, really great to be part of the society. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Bobby. Okay, so there's another following questions. It's from Norman. What is the best type of venue to showcase the advantages of your system or approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. The honest answer is really any kind of venue. We've been very surprised at the variety of venues that have reached out to us. Obviously when we started this, it was definitely more sports venues. So, NBA teams, soccer, football, things of that nature. But through the years, we've seen anything from a small library to a small family-owned restaurant to even like a prison system reach out, wanting to have sensory inclusive training and modifications, primarily because they understand that there is a segment of the population that they work with that needs that in order to have accessibility to those locations and facilities. So the short answer is any location really. It doesn't matter what size or and whether it's in a sports industry or a service industry. I think the biggest thing is that when you open your location up with the training, the modifications, the sensory bags, that really helps you cater to a very different population that now has the ability to engage with your business and be welcomed into your business as well.
Right. So thank you, Dr. Julian, for the answer, and I hope that answered your question, Norman. Okay, so there's another question from Sudipta Sengupta. How do you foresee the potential growth in Asian countries, mainly in India, integration this with IFM industry in India?
Uma, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I come from Indian descent. Both my parents are from UP and Bihar. I was born in the US, but visit India just about every summer, except the last few years. And personally speaking, I have loved ones who have sensory needs. And unfortunately, the Indian culture in particular isn't as welcoming when it comes to those with sensory needs or just mental issues in general. So I personally do want to see this growing and evolving in countries like India, where there is a stigma associated. You have a lot of volunteers, including myself, who speak Hindi and other dialects like Gujarati, Bhojpuri. So getting the content translated should not be a problem. And would love to see this at all the major cricket venues, at ITL games, at hockey matches, malls. It doesn't matter where. And similar to what Julian said, we just need one venue to kick this off, and then everybody else follows through. So would love to talk with you a bit more about how we can get this kick-started in India, because I guarantee there are individuals there who could really use the support and the training that we provide.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Uma, for the answer. Okay, so next question is from Hamdi Saglam. Any cooperation from the state authorities in Turkey? The government has the funding in supporting such initiatives?
I am not sure. Obviously, we would love to help anywhere in any country in the world. So I think definitely is something that we can take this really anywhere in the world and scale it to such ability that it can help any population at all.
Right. So there's another question from the floor. It's from Amir Amin. What about schools? Has it been tried there? I mean, in the US?
Yeah, yes, it has. And it's been very successful. So we have a separate school training. And it definitely has been very successful in school systems. And we also work with schools on creating sensory rooms as well, if they have the space for that. So yes, the short answer is it's definitely been very successful in schools. And I think it's also something that is definitely needed in the school systems in Asia that have, unfortunately, limited resources, particularly when it comes to disabilities.
Right. So there's another follow-up question from Amir. A brief background on autism will be helpful. At what age range is it diagnosed?
Yeah, 100%. So autism as a whole, is a relatively new medical diagnosis in the sense that it's only been in the common medical field for about 30 to 40 years. Initially, when autism was described, it was considered to be a mental condition because no one really understood what it is. But what autism primarily is an individual that's born in a way that they have a significant inability to engage with the environment. That's basically what it is. Autism is from the Latin word au, which is also known as self. So they are self-aware, but they're not others-aware. So by and large, a lot of these individuals have normal IQs, but for whatever reason, it's kind of like they're almost locked into themselves. So things that, sensory needs in particular are very high in terms of prevalence in this population. So things like the noises, the lights, and all that are very overloading to them. So because of that, they decide not to engage in the environment because there are no modifications for that. It's normally diagnosed around the age of 2 or 3, where you have a child that's been developing normally, and then suddenly something changes where their speech might decrease. They might start doing things like lining up objects, flapping their hands, not tolerating certain other sensory input and things of that nature. In terms of percentages, currently in the US, it's 1 in 54. But there are countries like Korea where the rates of autism are 1 in 30. So definitely a pretty high rate, varying on each country that you're in. When you talk about sensory needs, that is 1 in 4 individuals. And that definitely also has seen an increase, particularly after 2020, when a lot of the world was, locked in, safer at home. So I hope that answers the question, Mr. Amin.
Thank you, Amir, for the question. Right, so I have one question. So what type of jobs that are suitable for autistic people? What do you think? I mean,
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is really any kind of job.
okay.
I think it's one that every individual with autism is different. It's kind of like the saying that if you've seen one person with autism, you've only seen one person with autism. I think the goal of us as a community is to figure out how to create the best environment for these individuals to succeed in. And when they can feel welcomed and included, that opens up a myriad of possibilities of jobs that they can potentially do, especially when you couple it with a community that understands them and appreciates them.
Yes, I agree that because in the understanding of what autism is, it is very important for all of us. I mean, for all society, so that they can accept how the autism people, it should be. All right. So while waiting for the questions coming in, I think maybe I'll just I would like to inform that today we are organizing a best slogan competition for our audience. So all you have to do is to complete the following sentence in not more than 30 words creatively. Let me just show the just give me a second. All right, so as a facility management professional, I want to promote autism inclusive facility in my country because. So 5 lucky winners will be selected and will be entitled with a special gift sponsored by Kulture City. So if you wish to participate, kindly provide us your name, contact number and address for your shipping references. For those who are selected, kindly snap a photo of you with the gift in your hand and send it over to us at info@maxwellcfm.com. So yeah. So back to the questions, Dr. Julian. It's from Norman. Do you see autism as a hidden problem due to the wide range of severity and effects?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's the challenge, right? Because what we are dealing with is an invisible disability, where the individuals that have it look no different than you and I. And I think that's the issue. Because of that, there's a functional stigma to when we see an individual acting differently, our initial gut reaction is always, oh, the individual, if they're a child, is not disciplined enough. Their parents are not doing a good job. Or if they're older, the individual might have a mental condition or high on, drugs or alcohol or something like that. So that's what functionally makes it very challenging. So yes, it is a hidden problem, and I think it's one that, we, as quickly as we can, making our locations inclusive, can really help these families understand that we are here for them, and that we can help them embrace their loved ones so that they can be integrated into society in a much better way.
Okay, thank you for the questions, Norman, and thank you, Dr. Julian, for answering the question. Okay, I have one question here. In some hotels in the US, they are hiring people of special needs as staff. So what opportunities do autistic people have?
Yeah, I think that also varies. What we've seen throughout the years is definitely a push to hire more individuals with disabilities. And it's been a very good push because I don't know if you've heard, but we are going through a very interesting transition, particularly in the disability community in the US. For many years, if you had a disability and you held a job, your employer was allowed to pay you significantly less than minimum wage. That is going through a transition right now because the numbers of individuals with particularly invisible disabilities have increased in a huge way. So because of that, there is a fundamental push now to hire these individuals and really change that narrative.
I see. Okay, so when an autistic child with sensory support is in an open area, so how does the child respond to the environment?
Yeah, so normally it depends on the environment. If you're in an environment that, basically is very loud and all that, what you might see is the child might be closing their ears with their hands, they might be flapping, they potentially might even be hitting their head, things of that nature, because they're unable to cope with their environment. So by and large, they will try to actually leave that environment because of those sensory challenges around them. What you see if the venue has been trained, right, is that you might see someone approach their family and give them a sensory bag that has the noise cancelling headphones and other fidgets that help them deal with these sensory challenges so that they can actually enjoy this and not exhibit those behaviors when in that particular venue.
I see. So, do you think that having a sensory room in a facility is a form of corporate social responsibility?
Yes, 100%. I think not a sensory room per se, but the training and the and also the sensory bag modifications. I think having a sensory room is a great bonus, but it's not essential from what we've seen.
I see. Could you give some examples of those companies that have the approach of autism inclusive? Like which company?
Yeah, so I think all of the venues that we've worked with, from NBA arenas to to libraries and all that, not all of them have sensory rooms. Mm-hmm. I think all of them have our training, and I think that's been the huge thing.
Right, I see. So I'm still waiting for questions flowing in. All right. If you have any questions, just write down in the chat box, guys. Okay, while waiting for the rest of the questions, let me just ask question to you, Dr. Julian. So if preschools were sensory friendly, could it increase the ability of autistic children to join in mainstream education?
Yes, 100%.
Let's see.
Yeah. I think you have one question too.
Yes, there's one question from IR Daniel Sim. Any programs done successfully that can be shared?
Yeah, I'll let Uma jump in on that one.
Yeah, so I think each of our 800 venues is a success story, no matter how big or small they are, whether it's a library who is part of a 5,000 person population, all the way to here in the South, college football is big. So whether it's a college football stadium with a capacity of 100,000 fans, each of these venues has displayed their success. So our training has 3 prongs to it. First, our certification has 3 prongs. I'm sorry. First is training. So making sure staff are trained. That can be done online through a group format. And then second is sensory bags, having these bags available. Oftentimes, a lot of stadiums and venues here in the US don't allow for bags to come in for security purposes. So you aren't able to bring in your headphones or your fidget tools. So having this available at the venue, whether it's a stadium or a zoo, is extremely important. And the third prong is having a social story, that visual narrative that guides individuals to prepare for their visit. So if you check out our website, www.kulturecity.org, and that's culture with a K, you can scroll down about halfway and you'll see a map of the world, and you can click on each of the orange pins and see all the success stories. So whether it's a library, a police station, an aquarium, a coffee shop, a barber shop, you can see the program implemented in a variety of different venues.
Right, thank you, Miss Uma, for the insightful info and answer. Thank you. Okay, so there's another question from Amir Amin. Is it possible for the individual to recover from this condition? Do parents need to create special areas at home? I think Dr. Julian can answer that, or maybe Miss Uma.
Yeah, so autism is not a condition that is like a disease that you can recover from. It's one that someone is born with. So it's one that primarily you learn to live with the rest of your life. And I think that's the functional key. And obviously, for the other question of parents needing to create special areas in the home, it's only necessary in terms of if your child does need a space that's quieter, so that they can have that sensory break, from everything around them once in a while. So it's a good idea, but it depends on your child.
I see. Right. So next question is from Muhammad Ashrafi. What is the method of detection on the class of autism or dementia that we have to tackle so we can provide facility area that compatible in our facility operation process or event?
Yeah, Uma, you want to answer that and how they can find a sensory location, probably for a room or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, as I mentioned, we've designed sensory rooms worldwide. And sometimes when it's a new facility, we're able to work with the architecture firm to say, hey, we need to carve out a room that's, between these particular sizes. But oftentimes we are working in a facility that's been around for 20, 30, maybe 50 years, and moving rooms on the concourse oftentimes becomes difficult. So depending on whether it's a new build or an existing building, we'll look at how we can update the room itself, making sure there are light dimmers. Oftentimes, individuals with visual sensitivities are very sensitive to just normal lights that we have in our offices and our living rooms, making sure that the colors on the wall, the carpet colors aren't too bright, the patterns aren't too distracting. And then after that, we talk about the different elements that go into the room. So we provide a whole host of items that address each of the 8 senses that I showed earlier in the presentation. So a lot of planning goes into place. When you're looking at building out a sensory room, a quiet area at your facility, certainly, try to find a space that is quieter than the rest of the environment, that's easily accessible. If you're looking at an event, and you make the space at the VIP section, oftentimes the general public can't get there because they need extra credentials or security badges. And so you're making sure that the space is something that can be accessed by all. We typically do ask that you have a staff member waiting outside the room for a couple of reasons. We always encourage only one family or individual to use the room at a time. We don't want myself and then another random individual using the room at the same time, because our sensory overloads look very different. So the staff member ensures that they're controlling traffic. The second thing is once the family leaves, the staff member can wipe everything down, the different surfaces, and make sure the room is ready for the next family or individual to use. At events, we do a lot of different concerts, one-time events, and we found a couple of structures that we can use to kind of pop up for the concert, the 5-hour event, and then bring it back down. As far as design specifics, yes, we have a lot that goes behind this. I'm going to type in our email address, and if you don't mind shooting over a quick email, we can chat more about this offline, because there are a lot of details and a lot of thought that goes on behind this, and it'll take another 20-30 minutes, and I don't want to overwhelm individuals with all that information.
All right, thank you, Ms. Uma, for answering. Okay, so I think I have a question. All right, so in your experience, how can a facility manager win the top management buy-in to have a sensory room in the company? Either Dr. Jin or Ms. Uma.
Yeah. So definitely, having the top management, the executive levels buying in makes an impact. It's a lot easier to get the program approved, to work on the certification, the training, other components. And so, oftentimes sharing our story, letting folks know, hey, this is the true impact. And this is how we are truly changing lives for families and individuals day in and day out. We have some statistics where our program was able to increase ticket sales. So if you're talking to some folks in finance, again, please email us and we'll be happy to share with you a bit more on those statistics as far as the impact it's had on the bottom line. So if they're not warm and friendly and they don't really care about, the heartwarming stories, which there are some people, they'll certainly care about the bottom line and the dollar amount and the financial impact. And so, again, please email us and we'll be happy to set up a more detailed one-on-one to provide you with that content and provide you with the assets.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question from Muhammad Rizal bin Baharom. Brilliant CSR for corporations, developers to consider this inclusivity for their built environment. So how do you factor in cost PSF for a premise?
Go ahead on that.
Yeah. So our certification is a yearly fee. It is $750 US, and that includes the online training. It includes the sensory bags, the weighted lap pad, and that social story development. Depending on where you are located in the world, we might have additional customs fees that we have to factor in for shipping these items internationally. But again, because our platform, our LMS system is, built online, it doesn't matter where you're located and what the time difference is. So looking at about, $750 US per year for the certification. And then if you're thinking about a sensory room, of course, we would recommend the different elements that go into that room, the different tactile, auditory, visual, vestibular items that are needed. And then
welcome to the first.
Depending on, again, where you're located, we could either source them from the US or see if our vendor has a location at the country you're in.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from Shamsuddin Ishaq. Do you consider person with autism is the same as disabled person?
I think the question is going to be, how do you consider a disabled person?
Okay.
Before I can answer that. Yeah. So if he wants to reply in the chat, that would be great.
Okay, I think are we going to wait for another question? Is it okay for both of you?
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
If you have any more questions, yeah.
So, okay. All right. While waiting, let me just share once again this. Yep. All right. Okay. Julian, can you explain what is disabled? I mean, in your perspective, what do you say disabled? What you say disabled is?
So I don't think that there's actually a good explanation for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we as a society have to change our thoughts of what disability is.
Okay.
Because, I think we're so used as a society to say, okay, this is something normal, this is something not. But the question is that, what is normal, right?
True.
I think on some level, all of us interact with our environment in a very different way, okay? And we have to understand that on some level, all of us have challenges. So when you talk about disability, you're talking about someone that maybe has a little bit more challenges than you. But the way that they should be treated should be exactly the same as you. They shouldn't be treated any different or considered any less because they have more challenges than you do. And I think that's the key that we as a community needs to understand.
See. You. Right. I think all right. Okay. I think there's another question that I want to ask. Is making a venue or workspace seen as extra cost to most companies, or do some see it as investment with positive returns, including financial?
Yeah, I definitely think it's, an investment that you're making for your company culture, for your employees, for your fans, for your guests. Yes, there is a little bit of an initial fee, but you truly see that being returned to you, whether it's through those stories, whether it's families now purchasing season tickets to come enjoy more of your games or events that you may have.
All right. Okay. So there's another question from Amir Amin. My friend's autistic son experiences depression. Is that common, and can such facilities help reduce it?
Yes, that's common, and yes, making your location inclusive definitely can help reduce it.
Okay. Right. I think there's no other questions from the floor.
Safina, can I interrupt the session?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Kavi here. Okay, Mr. Samsudin Ishak would like to ask a question verbally. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to request my assistant here to turn on the microphone for him. Don't mind. Okay, Mr. Shamsuddin, you may turn on your microphone and you may ask your question, sir.
Yes, I got it. Thank you very much, baby. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to reply Dr. Julian's question just now regarding my question about whether people with autism can be considered as the disabled person. I asked because there's already a regulation here in Malaysia about the designs of built buildings and all that must comply with all these conditions about for the disabled person. Okay, but I was wondering whether autism is one of them, because maybe that's already there in Malaysia. But I'm not fully aware of that. But is it the same as in the US that
Yes.
autism is considered as the disabled person? Because there's always the condition, for us to comply with in the design of any buildings and all that. I always understand about the requirement for the disabled person, but I'm not sure whether autism person is also required. Whether the condition for disabled or for the autism person is required in the regulation. At least in the US, is this already there in the US?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the answer is no, not really. When in the US, when you talk about disability, you're still talking about visible disability. So this is someone, in a wheelchair or might need a walker to walk, things of that nature. Sensory accessibility, which is what Culture City has been pushing for, is a relatively new concept. And that's kind of why we have become the leaders in this movement, not only in the US, but in the rest of the world. Because before we came along, no one really understood how big this population is. But now with the increasing numbers and the greater understanding that this is definitely something that's not only going up in the US, but the rest of the world, I think there's going to be some new laws that introduce sensory accessibility to all venues and things of that nature. So by incorporating it and picking this up now, you're kind of getting ahead of the curve. But right now in the US, in regards to your question, no, it's not considered the same. There are some similarities when it comes to school systems, but not for public spaces. So I hope that helps.